Maple Street was the kind of place where people waved at each other and talked about small things like weather, lawns, and paint colors. The houses were close enough that neighbors noticed every change. If a trash bin stayed outside one extra day, someone would mention it. If a tree branch leaned too far over a fence, someone would take a photo and share it in the neighborhood group. At the end of the street stood a small, older house with a low porch and a narrow path of stones leading to the front door. The paint was faded, but the windows were clean. A tidy garden sat to one side with simple flowers and a bird feeder. A wind chime hung near the porch roof, making a soft sound whenever the breeze moved. This house belonged to Grandpa Tom. Most people on Maple Street knew him as the quiet older man who watered his plants early in the morning and walked slowly to the corner store twice a week. He did not argue with anyone. He did not play loud music. He did not throw parties. He mostly kept to himself. When kids rode their bikes too fast near his porch, he would only smile and lift one hand to remind them to be careful. He was polite, calm, and steady. But the neighborhood had changed. New families moved in. Some old residents left. The HOA became stricter. New rules appeared in emails almost every week. People started judging each other more than before. A few neighbors seemed to enjoy reporting small things. Grandpa Tom's house was old. It looked different from the newer houses that had fresh paint and shiny doors. His fence was not new. His porch steps had tiny marks from many years of use. To Grandpa Tom, those things were normal. To some HOA members, they were problems waiting to be listed. That afternoon, a message appeared in the HOA system. It was short and formal. Request for compliance visit. Possible violations. Please send authorities for support. Someone had also added a note. Resident may refuse entry. Property condition needs review. The HOA office made a call. The police station received the request. It was not an emergency. No one said there was danger. Still, the request was clear enough to send officers to check the situation and keep things calm. A little later, 2 police cars turned onto Maple Street. Their engines were quiet, but the sight was loud. People noticed immediately. Curtains moved. Doors opened a little. A man watering his lawn stopped and stared. A woman holding grocery bags slowed down and looked toward the end of the street. Even a dog stopped pulling on its leash and sat down, as if it sensed something unusual. The police cars rolled forward and stopped in front of Grandpa Tom's house. Officer Mark stepped out first. He was in his early 30s, tall and serious in a calm way. He had the look of someone who listened more than he spoke. Officer Lena stepped out next. She was about the same age, alert and sharp-eyed. She scanned the area like she always did, not because she expected trouble, but because it was her habit. Mark held a folder with printed notes from the HOA. Lena looked at the house again. "It looks fine," Lena said softly. Mark nodded. "It usually does. But we follow the call." They walked up the stone path. The wind chime made a small sound. The garden looked cared for. The porch was clean. There was nothing that seemed urgent. Mark lifted his hand and knocked. The knock was not loud, but it carried in the quiet street. A few neighbors leaned forward. Someone raised a phone as if ready to record, then lowered it when another neighbor gave them a look. Inside the house, Grandpa Tom heard the knock clearly. He was in the living room, sitting in a wooden chair near a window. A small radio sat on a shelf, turned low. A clock on the wall ticked. On the table beside him was a cup of tea and a folded newspaper. Grandpa Tom did not rush. He did not panic. He set the newspaper down neatly, placed his hand on his walking stick, and stood up. His movements were slow but steady, like a person who had learned patience over time. He walked to the front door and paused for a moment, listening. He could hear voices outside. He heard the gentle shift of feet on the porch. He opened the door. The officers expected to see a confused older man, maybe annoyed that someone had brought police to his home. They expected a short talk and a quick report back to the HOA. What they saw made them both stop. Grandpa Tom stood straight, even with his walking stick. His shirt was clean and tucked in. His face was calm, but his eyes were clear and focused. There was nothing weak or careless about him. Behind him, the living room wall held several framed pictures arranged with care. One photo showed a younger Grandpa Tom in uniform, standing beside a group of other people. Another photo showed him shaking hands with someone in a formal setting. On a shelf sat a folded flag in a triangular display case. Nearby were medals inside a glass frame, each one polished and placed in a neat row. Officer Lena noticed the medals first. Her eyes moved across them quickly, then back again more slowly. Officer Mark's grip on the folder tightened. He did not speak right away. Grandpa Tom looked at them and gave a polite nod. "Good afternoon," he said. His voice was gentle, but it carried a steady strength. "How can I help you?" Mark blinked once, then glanced at the wall behind Grandpa Tom. "Hello, sir," Mark said. "We are here because we received a request from the HOA. They asked us to stop by and check on a complaint about the property." Grandpa Tom's expression did not change, but something in the air shifted. It felt like the quiet before a storm, even though no storm clouds were visible. Lena took one small step closer, still on the porch, still respectful. Her eyes stayed on the flag case and the framed medals. "Sir," Lena said carefully, "are you Grandpa Tom who has lived here for many years?" Grandpa Tom nodded once. "Yes, that is me." Mark cleared his throat. "The request mentions possible violations. It also mentions that you may refuse entry. We are not here to cause trouble. We just need to understand what is going on." Grandpa Tom looked down the street for a moment. He saw the neighbors watching. He saw the small cluster of faces and half-open doors. He saw curiosity, judgment, and excitement mixed together in the same scene. Then he looked back at the officers. "I understand," he said, "but I would like to know what the complaint is. Not a general complaint. The exact complaint." Mark opened the folder and read the printed lines. The words sounded strange out loud, because they were vague. Things like appearance not consistent, and items stored, and structure concern. There was nothing clear, nothing specific, nothing that seemed worth sending police cars. Lena looked uneasy. She had been on calls where people used official systems to create pressure. She had seen how small disputes could grow into something ugly. She did not like that feeling. Grandpa Tom listened without interrupting. When Mark finished reading, Grandpa Tom remained calm. "I see," Grandpa Tom said. "So they want you to look around my home and confirm their worries." Mark hesitated. "We are here to make sure everyone is safe and that things stay calm. That is our job." Grandpa Tom gave a small nod. "I respect that." He stepped back slightly, not as an invitation, but as a signal that he was thinking carefully. Then he said something that made both officers feel a sudden tightness in their stomachs. "I will cooperate," Grandpa Tom said. "But first, I want you both to look at those frames on the wall. Please take a good look." Mark and Lena looked again. Lena's eyes caught a name on one certificate. She read it twice, slowly. Her face changed. Mark leaned slightly, reading another framed document. His expression became more serious. The calm visit was no longer calm. This was not going to end with a simple HOA report. Outside, the neighbors kept watching, unaware that their little complaint had just opened a door to a story much bigger than lawn rules and paint colors. And Grandpa Tom, still standing in his doorway, looked as steady as a lighthouse. Officer Lena stepped inside the house first, slowly and with respect. Officer Mark followed, closing the door gently behind them. The noise from the street faded, and the house felt calm and steady, like it had been holding stories for many years. The living room was simple and clean. Nothing was fancy, but everything had a place. The wooden floor shined softly. The chairs were old but strong. The air smelled faintly of tea and paper. Grandpa Tom stood near the doorway, giving the officers space. He did not rush them. He did not speak right away. He let the room speak for him. Lena walked closer to the wall with the frames. She read the certificates slowly. One showed years of service. Another showed awards for leadership and dedication. A third had an official seal and a signature that Lena recognized from her training days. Her breathing slowed. Mark looked at the folded flag in its glass case. He had seen flags like that before. He knew what they meant. His shoulders stiffened, and his tone changed without him noticing. "Sir," Mark said carefully, "may I ask about these?" Grandpa Tom nodded. "You may." "These certificates," Lena said, pointing gently, "they show long service. Public service." "Yes," Grandpa Tom replied. "Many years." Mark cleared his throat. "And this flag?" Grandpa Tom looked at it with quiet respect. "It was given to me after my retirement. It represents duty, not power." Lena felt a weight settle in her chest. She understood now why the room felt different. This was not just a house. It was a record of a life spent serving others. Mark glanced at the folder in his hands. The HOA notes felt small and careless compared to what stood in front of him. "Sir," Mark said, "the complaint we received does not match what we see here." Grandpa Tom gave a slight smile. That is often how things are when people look without understanding. Lena stepped back a little, giving Grandpa Tom her full attention. "May we ask who made the complaint?" Grandpa Tom shook his head slowly. "I was not told. And I did not ask. Names matter less than actions." Outside, the neighbors were still watching. Some whispered to each other. Some felt excited. Others felt nervous. They could not hear the conversation, but they could sense that something serious was happening. Inside the house, Mark took a deep breath. "Sir, we are required to report back to the HOA. Before we do that, is there anything you would like us to know?" Grandpa Tom walked toward the window and looked out at the street. He saw familiar faces. Some had waved at him in the past. Some had ignored him. Some had smiled only when they needed something. "I moved into this house many years ago," Grandpa Tom said. "I raised my family here. I served my country and my community. When I retired, I chose peace. I chose a quiet life." He turned back to the officers. "I follow the rules. I respect order. But I do not believe rules should be used to intimidate or embarrass." Lena nodded slowly. "I agree with that." Mark looked uncomfortable. The request mentioned support from authorities. That usually means they expected tension. Grandpa Tom's eyes were calm but firm. "There is no tension here. Only misunderstanding." Lena walked toward the door and peeked outside. She saw a woman holding a phone, pretending to check messages. She saw a man leaning against a fence, arms crossed. She saw curiosity mixed with something else. Something close to regret. Lena turned back to Mark. "We should speak with the HOA directly." Mark nodded. He stepped aside and made a call. His voice was low and controlled. "We are at the location," Mark said. "We see no safety concerns. The property is maintained. The resident is cooperative." There was a pause as he listened. "Yes," Mark continued. "We have reviewed the home. There are no violations that require police presence." Another pause. "I understand the request," Mark said. "But we cannot support unnecessary pressure on a resident." He ended the call and looked at Grandpa Tom. "They asked if you would agree to an inspection by the HOA board," Mark said. Grandpa Tom smiled slightly. "I have never refused an inspection. I only ask that it be done with respect." Lena felt relief. "That seems fair." Mark closed the folder. "We will report that there is no issue requiring enforcement." Grandpa Tom nodded. "Thank you." The officers moved toward the door. Before leaving, Lena turned back. "Sir," she said, "I want to say something personal." Grandpa Tom listened. "You have lived a life of service," Lena said. "It shows. Some people forget that behind old walls are real stories." Grandpa Tom's smile was gentle. "Thank you for seeing that." The door opened, and the afternoon light filled the room again. Mark and Lena stepped onto the porch. The street went quiet. Neighbors watched as the officers walked calmly back to their cars. No arguments. No raised voices. No warnings. A few people looked confused. One neighbor whispered, "That was fast." Another lowered their phone slowly. The police cars started and pulled away, leaving Maple Street just as quiet as before. Inside the house, Grandpa Tom returned to his chair. He picked up his newspaper and took a sip of his tea. His hands were steady. Outside, the HOA office received the report. No violations found. No action needed. But the story was not over. Because the person who made the complaint was now feeling something new. Unease. And soon, questions would be asked. The next morning on Maple Street felt different. The air was quiet, but not calm. Neighbors stepped outside with slower movements. Some avoided eye contact. Others whispered in small groups near driveways. The police visit from the day before had shaken the usual rhythm of the street. Inside the HOA office, the mood was tense. The report from the police sat on the desk of the HOA manager, a woman named Linda. She read it again, even though she already knew what it said. No violations found. No safety concerns. Police presence not required. Linda pressed her lips together. This was not the outcome she expected. The complaint had sounded serious enough to involve authorities. Someone had insisted the situation could turn difficult. Now the police had clearly disagreed. Linda leaned back in her chair and looked at the list of board members. She knew exactly who had pushed hardest for the visit. A board member named Carl had been very vocal in recent meetings. He often talked about order, standards, and appearances. He had complained about Grandpa Tom more than once. Linda picked up the phone and called Carl. "Carl," she said when he answered, "we need to talk." There was a pause, then Carl spoke. "About the house at the end of Maple Street." "Yes," Linda replied. "The police found no issues. They were not pleased with being called for this." Carl sounded defensive. "I was just following the rules. That house does not match the neighborhood image." Linda sighed. "Carl, rules are meant to guide, not target. You escalated this too far." "I did nothing wrong," Carl said sharply. "People expect us to maintain standards." Linda ended the call without arguing further. She knew this was not finished. Back on Maple Street, Grandpa Tom went about his routine like any other day. He watered his plants. He fed the birds. He waved at a passing delivery driver. From the outside, nothing had changed. But inside, Grandpa Tom was thinking. He had lived long enough to recognize patterns. He knew when a situation was truly over and when it was only resting before the next move. The HOA might pause, but pressure had a way of returning in new forms. Later that afternoon, a knock came at his door. This time, it was not the police. Grandpa Tom opened the door to find Linda standing on the porch. She held a folder and wore a polite but nervous expression. "Good afternoon, Mr. Tom," she said. "May I speak with you?" Grandpa Tom nodded. "Of course. Please come in." Linda stepped inside and immediately felt the same calm weight that the officers had felt the day before. She noticed the frames on the wall. She noticed the medals. She noticed the care in the room. They sat across from each other at the small table. "I wanted to apologize," Linda began. "The situation was not handled well." Grandpa Tom listened without interrupting. "The police made it clear that their time should not have been used this way," Linda continued. "And after reviewing everything, we found no violations." Grandpa Tom folded his hands. I appreciate you coming in person. Linda hesitated. I also want to be honest. Some board members feel embarrassed. Others feel angry. They believe this makes the HOA look weak. Grandpa Tom's eyes stayed calm. Strength does not come from control. It comes from fairness. Linda nodded slowly. I agree. But not everyone does. She opened the folder and slid a document across the table. This is a formal notice stating that your property is in full compliance. It also states that no further action will be taken regarding this complaint. Grandpa Tom looked at the paper but did not pick it up right away. And what about future complaints? Linda took a breath. I cannot promise no one will complain again, but I can promise that we will review things more carefully. Grandpa Tom finally took the paper and nodded. That is all I ask. When Linda left, she felt lighter but also uneasy. She knew Carl and a few others would not let this go easily. That evening, the HOA held an emergency board meeting. Carl spoke first. We were undermined, he said. The police sided with him. Now the manager is backing down. Another board member, a quiet man named Ben, spoke up. Or maybe we were wrong. Carl turned sharply. Wrong about what? Ben leaned forward. Wrong about assuming. Wrong about escalating. Wrong about treating an old neighbor like a problem. The room went silent. A woman named Sarah, who rarely spoke, raised her hand. I grew up here, she said. That house has always been there. Grandpa Tom has always been respectful. Maybe we forgot that people matter more than rules. Carl scoffed. Sentiment does not run an association. Linda looked at Carl firmly. Respect does. She placed the police report on the table. If we continue like this, we risk legal trouble. More than that, we risk losing trust. The board voted. By a narrow margin, they decided to revise how complaints were handled. Police involvement would require clear safety reasons. Anonymous complaints would face stricter review. Carl sat back, his jaw tight. He had lost this round. The next day, something unexpected happened. A few neighbors approached Grandpa Tom while he worked in his garden. One brought a small box of cookies. Another offered to help fix a loose fence post. A woman who had once complained about his porch steps now apologized quietly. We did not know, she said. Grandpa Tom smiled gently. Knowing comes from asking, not assuming. Word spread quickly. The story of the police visit changed as it passed from person to person. At first, it was gossip. Then it became reflection. Some people felt ashamed. Others felt defensive. But many began to see Grandpa Tom differently. Not as a problem. As a pillar. One afternoon, Officer Lena returned to Maple Street, this time off duty. She walked up to Grandpa Tom's house and knocked. I hope this is okay, she said when he opened the door. I wanted to check on you. Grandpa Tom welcomed her inside. I wanted you to know, Lena said, that your case became a lesson at the station. About judgment. About respect. Grandpa Tom nodded. Lessons are only useful if we accept them. Lena smiled. I think many of us did. As the sun set that evening, Grandpa Tom sat on his porch, watching the light fade. The street was quiet again, but this time, it felt different in a better way. The panic that once filled the doorway had turned into understanding. But one person still watched from behind a curtain, feeling something heavy. Carl. And his silence hinted that the story was not yet finished. The following week brought a quiet shift to Maple Street. The kind of shift that could not be seen easily, but could be felt. People moved a little slower. Conversations sounded more careful. The street was learning how to look at itself. Grandpa Tom noticed the change right away. More neighbors waved now. Some stopped to talk. A few asked questions about his garden or his bird feeder. These were small things, but they mattered. For years, Grandpa Tom had lived quietly among them. Now, they were finally seeing him. Not everyone was comfortable with this change. Carl watched from his house near the corner. He felt like control had slipped from his hands. The board meeting still echoed in his mind. The vote. The way people looked at him. The way Linda spoke with calm authority. Carl believed rules were power. Without strict order, things fell apart. That was his belief, shaped by years of needing control to feel secure. And Grandpa Tom challenged that belief without raising his voice. One afternoon, Carl decided to act. He walked to the HOA office with a folder under his arm. Inside were photos he had taken over time. Close shots of Grandpa Tom's fence, the porch steps, the side yard. Each photo was framed to look worse than it was. Linda looked up as Carl entered. "I am filing another review request," Carl said firmly. Linda did not raise her voice. "Carl, we just resolved this." "This is different," Carl replied. "I found new concerns." Linda opened the folder and looked through the photos. She frowned. "These are selective angles," she said. "You know that." Carl crossed his arms. "The rules allow inspections." "Yes," Linda said. "But not harassment." The word hung in the air. Carl stiffened. "I am doing my duty." Linda closed the folder. "No. You are pushing a personal issue." Carl's face flushed. "Are you accusing me?" "I am warning you," Linda replied. "This behavior puts the HOA at risk." Carl left without another word, but his anger followed him out the door. That evening, Carl made a mistake. He sent an email to the entire neighborhood mailing list. The message was long and emotional. He spoke about standards, appearances, and decline. He mentioned Grandpa Tom's house without using his name, but everyone knew who he meant. The email spread fast, and it did not have the effect Carl expected. Replies came in quickly. Some neighbors pushed back. Others asked why police had been involved in the first place. A few openly criticized the tone of the message. One reply stood out. It was from Ben. He wrote about respect, about history, about how rules should protect people, not target them. He reminded everyone that Grandpa Tom had lived there longer than most of the board members. Soon, others joined in. Carl watched the replies pile up. His screen filled with words he did not like. Disagreement, concern, disappointment. For the first time, Carl felt isolated. The next morning, Linda received a call from the HOA legal advisor. The email had raised concerns. "We need to be careful," the advisor said. "This situation could turn into a complaint against the board." Linda agreed. "I will handle it." She scheduled a neighborhood meeting at the community hall. When the day arrived, the room filled slowly. Grandpa Tom came early and sat near the back. He did not want attention. He wanted peace. Carl arrived later and sat near the front, arms crossed. Linda stood at the front of the room. "This meeting is about moving forward," she said. "Not blame. Not anger." She explained the revised complaint process. She spoke about fairness and responsibility. She reminded everyone that the HOA existed to support the community. Then she opened the floor. A woman stood up. "I want to apologize," she said. "I complained about Grandpa Tom's porch steps once. I did not think about how it might feel." Another man spoke. "We forgot that this street has history. People are not projects." The room grew quieter. Finally, Carl stood. He looked around and realized he no longer had the support he thought he did. His voice was firm, but less confident. "I believe in standards," he said. "Without them, neighborhoods fall apart." Grandpa Tom stood slowly. Everyone turned. "I believe in standards too," Grandpa Tom said calmly. "But standards should lift people, not push them down." He looked at Carl, not with anger, but with patience. I never refused rules, Grandpa Tom continued. I only refused to be treated like a problem. Silence filled the room. Carl had no reply. After the meeting, people approached Grandpa Tom. Some shook his hand. Others simply nodded with respect. Carl left early. That night, Carl sat alone in his house. He reread the police report. He reread the email replies. He felt something unfamiliar. Doubt. 4 years, control had been his shield. Now, it felt heavy. On Maple Street, Grandpa Tom sat on his porch again, listening to the night sounds. The street lights glowed softly. The air was cool. Peace was returning. But true change often takes time. And Carl still had a choice to make. Morning sunlight spread gently across Maple Street. The houses looked the same as always, but the feeling was new. It was lighter. People stepped outside with less tension in their shoulders. Conversations sounded warmer. Grandpa Tom woke early, as he always did. He made his tea, opened the window, and listened to the birds. He felt calm. The long week of attention and meetings had been tiring, but he felt something important had shifted. Across the street, Carl sat at his kitchen table, staring at an untouched cup of coffee. He had barely slept. His thoughts moved in circles. Every reply from the neighborhood email list replayed in his mind. Every look from the meeting echoed in his chest. For the first time in many years, Carl questioned himself. He had always believed control meant safety, that rules kept chaos away. But now he wondered if his fear of disorder had made him blind to people. Later that day, Linda received an unexpected email. It was from Carl. The message was short. I would like to step down from the board. Temporarily. I need time to reflect. Linda read it twice. She felt relief, but also sadness. She replied with a calm message, thanking him for his service and accepting his request. The news spread quietly. Neighbors noticed Carl staying inside more. He no longer walked the street with a clipboard. He no longer watched others with sharp eyes. His absence felt strange, but also peaceful. One afternoon, Carl stood at his window and watched Grandpa Tom working in his garden. The old man moved slowly, carefully placing soil around a small plant. A child from down the street ran past and waved. Grandpa Tom waved back. Carl felt something shift. He took a breath and stepped outside. Crossing the street felt harder than he expected. Each step carried weight. When he reached the edge of Grandpa Tom's yard, he stopped. Grandpa Tom noticed him and straightened up. "Good afternoon," Grandpa Tom said calmly. Carl swallowed. "Good afternoon." There was an awkward pause. "I owe you an apology," Carl said finally. His voice was tight. "I let rules turn into weapons. I forgot there was a person in front of me." Grandpa Tom studied Carl's face. He saw tiredness, not anger. "Apologies are not about the past," Grandpa Tom said. "They are about what comes next." Carl nodded slowly. "I am trying to understand that." They stood in silence for a moment, not uncomfortable, just honest. "If you ever need help with the fence," Carl said, "I have tools." Grandpa Tom smiled gently. "Thank you." That evening, Maple Street held a small gathering. Nothing official. Just neighbors bringing chairs and food outside. Someone brought music. Kids played. Laughter filled the air. Grandpa Tom sat among them, not at the center, but not hidden either. People asked him questions about his garden. Someone asked about the photos in his house. He shared simple stories, never bragging, never seeking praise. Carl arrived quietly and stood at the edge. After a moment, someone handed him a plate. Someone else nodded at him. He felt nervous, but welcomed. Linda watched from nearby, feeling proud of the change. As the sun set, Officer Lena drove past Maple Street. She slowed and smiled when she saw the gathering. She did not stop. She did not need to. The street had found its balance. Later that night, Grandpa Tom returned to his quiet home. He looked at the frames on the wall. The medals. The flag. They were not symbols of power to him. They were reminders of service. He sat in his chair and reflected. The police visit had started with fear and misunderstanding. It had grown into conflict. But it had ended with growth. Not because of force, but because people chose to listen. Across the street, Carl sat in his living room with the lights low. He felt lighter than he had in years. Letting go of control had not brought chaos. It had brought peace. Maple Street returned to its normal rhythm. But it was better than before. People looked at each other with more care. Complaints became conversations. Rules became guides, not weapons. And Grandpa Tom remained what he had always been. A quiet strength at the end of the street. A reminder that respect is earned not by authority, but by character.